Hey there. So, this happened last year while I was working at a local thrift store. We had always been one of the more popular and busy shops, so there was never a dull moment. But that also meant we were typically the go to for donation drop offs. I was a shift manager, so I was often there late, making sure all the donations were in, sorted, and put away so that we didn't have to come back to a mess. At the time of this event, it was November, and we were doing a coat drive. One of the hospitals nearby did an adopt a family type deal each year, but they always started it early for this reason. They supplied the families with the coats that we got, as well as food and gifts for the holiday. Our facility was big enough to store all the coats for them, as well as wash and sort them, and they always brought us treats for our work, so really, it was a win-win-win. I liked all the feel-goods, you know? But this did not bring good feelings. This night, I already had 2 people working on the coats, and for some reason, we got slammed with donations. It was like a whole neighborhood moved out and just left us with everything they didn't want to take. It was probably about an hour after closing, and I felt bad keeping a couple of them after their shift. Everyone was so kind and thoughtful of others when it came to covering breaks or shifts, but I never expect anyone to stay longer than they're scheduled. This is why I usually stay late, so when we finally got everything in, I told them that they could head out. One of my guys, Ollie, agreed to watch the store so I could at least take a quick break before he left too, which I was thankful for. I went out to my truck so that I could smoke really quick and call my boyfriend. Afterwards, I usually just sit there with my window down, enjoying the night air, while doing something on my phone before I have to go back. This time, though, I just cracked the window and never fully rolled it down. I guess I was just being lazy or just too tired to bother with it. They were manual windows after all. I think I was reading some article or story because I was pretty involved in my phone, to the point that I wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings. So, when I noticed the time and went to get out of my car, I felt my soul leave my body, as I saw a kid standing by my driver's door staring at me. After letting out a hefty yelp, I caught my breath and realized that this kid had not budged. You know how when you scare someone by accident, so you also jump from being startled? Yeah, they didn't do that. They just continued staring in my truck. So, I say kid because they definitely looked younger, not to mention the old-timey school uniform that they were wearing. They had long, straight dark hair, and bangs long enough to cover their eyes. I always parked in the same spot, which was right below one of the few lights in the parking lot. Because of this, the light hit the top of their head, causing even more of a shadow on their face. After a few seconds that honestly felt like minutes, they hadn't moved from my door, making it so that I couldn't get out. So I just asked, can I help you? They didn't say anything, so I put my face closer to the glass to make out their face. And that's when they finally spoke. Can you give me a ride home? In a low, almost monotone voice. I continued to sit there for a moment before they finally repeated, saying, Ma'am, can you give me a ride home? Now hearing their voice, I was certain that it was a kid. They couldn't have been more than 14 years old or so. I had a son that was 12 at the time, and he was about the same height. But even though they were just a kid, something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. I noticed that I started shivering, but it wasn't even really cold. I felt incredibly uneasy, so I slowly lifted my hand and placed it on the lock. I spoke as I locked the door, trying to disguise what I was doing, and I told the kid, I'm sorry, hun, I'm still on working, just on break. Are you okay? Are you out here alone? The kid just said again with no emotion, Yes, Please, ma'am, I'm scared and I just want to go home. Can you let me in? For someone who said that they were scared, they didn't look, act, or sound scared at all. They didn't look around, there was no breaking in their voice, and their breathing didn't even seem erratic. So, I told them again that I was still on the clock, and that I had to get back, but I offered to call an Uber or their parents, or even the police if they felt that they were in danger. They declined my offer, insisting that I should be the one to take them home. I was starting to become overwhelmed with fear. I couldn't get out of my truck because they were standing close enough to breathe on the window. I also did not want to get out with them so close to me. I didn't know what they were planning. So, in case something were to happen, I wanted to make sure that I knew what they looked like. I took my cell phone and shined the flashlight on their face, and that made it even worse. I realized it wasn't their bangs or the shadow in the darkness covering their eyes. Their eyes were pitch black. I could see their mouth and nose and followed it up to their eyes, and they just looked sunken in and dark, like they had no eyes at all. This caused me to say something a little unladylike, and I quickly rolled my window up the rest of the way and called Ollie. There was no way in hell I was getting out of my truck now. As I explained to Ollie what was going on, this kid just continued staring into my truck. He agreed to walk out to my truck to make sure that I could get out safely. At least I was hoping that if they tried anything, it would be a 2v1, so the odds should be in our favor. As Ollie approached my truck, I could hear him shouting something in our direction. This caused the kid to look over at him, and Ollie stopped dead in his tracks. I cracked my window again and told the kid that it was best that they move along, and that we would call for help. They slowly turned their head back towards me, then opposite of Ollie, and slowly started walking towards the edge of the parking lot towards the road. I was still a bit torn, but maybe that was because I was a mom. I was terrified. That fear that caused me to barricade myself in my truck was not letting up, but yet, I didn't want this kid to walk into the street. I quickly called 911, and when they were far enough away, I got out. I talked to Ollie for no more than a minute or so as I explained what all had happened. By the time I turned back around to look for the kid, they were gone. The parking lot was bare. There was a small median at the edge that just had barberry bushes in it. If you aren't familiar with them, they're pretty much just small purplish leaves and thorns everywhere. There's no way they tried to hide in it because of those thorns. There was nothing else in the lot, and I was in complete confusion as to where they could have gone. My shivering seemed to get worse, but again, I wasn't cold. I sure was terrified, though. We both went back into the store, locking the doors and waiting for the police. Thankfully, Ollie agreed to stay with me until they arrived, which made me feel better, and also made my experience more credible, I suppose. When they got there, we told them what we had witnessed. I left out the eye thing because I didn't want them to think I was crazy or pulling some prank. I basically explained that there was a kid around here with no adults, and that they were asking for help but took off. They looked around the building, in that same lot, and even across the street. As you may have guessed, they never found them. But they said that they would make a report and check for missing and runaway children reports. I never heard anything else about it after that incident. Ollie and I have never forgotten about it, and, in fact, we've talked about it on occasion. He told me about when he stopped walking towards me. When they turned to look at him, all that he could see was a dark face with faint, glowing eyes. He said it was like the glare that some people's eyes have in photos, but there was no reason for that to happen by just looking at them. Between that and the overwhelming dread he instantly got too, he felt his body made him stop, or something told him to not get closer. I kind of knew of black-eyed kids' stories prior, but I never really thought about it one way or another. I started looking into it more after I told a friend about this, and they were up in arms, thinking that I had just experienced one. I can definitely believe it now between the weird clothes, dark yet glowing eyes, not to mention the eerie feeling they brought with them. If it was a black-eyed kid, then I hope to never experience anything like that again, because I don't know how I would react, and I don't want to know what would happen if there wasn't a barrier between us.